Sony versus Nikon. One lens, travel-friendly, full-frame, high megapixel setup. More specifically, Nikon Z7 with the 24-200 f4 to 6.3 versus A7R5 with the Tamron 28-200 f2.8 to f5.6. Now you may be asking yourself why these specific setups, and the reason for that is pretty simple. I've been searching a lot, trying to find the best solution for me to basically have a setup like that that would work for all the travel that I do, hiking and stuff like that. And I ended up with these two setups are as the best options for the job. Now, of course, I have the Z7, it's pretty old. There's the Z7 II around, but that camera is not that different from the Z7, aside from the dual slot and minor tweaks here and there. So I went for the cheapest option that I had in the used market, and that's why I have the Z7. There's also other options around, and we're going to talk about those in a second. But also the reason for that is that I purchased those, so I've been able to test them and take them out and do a lot of stuff with that. And so I have no specific bias towards one or the other. I'm not sponsored by any of the brands involved, neither by Nikon, by Sony, or by Tamron. These are the three brands involved. However, this channel for this video has a sponsor. That sponsor is K&F with its carbon fiber tripod, but we're going to talk about that later in the video. Now, I mentioned that there's other cameras around that could have been part of this, and I took them out. Why? Well, Nikon, the only other option would be the Z8 or the Z9, but both of those, especially the Z9, but even the Z8 are pretty big and heavy. They are far from being travel friendly. And the reason why you get a setup like this, one lens, one camera, is to be pretty much lightweight and compact. With the Z8, you take the compact and lightweight out of the equation. In Sony, you could get the A7CR, which is the camera that is recording me right now. So it's a camera that I could have put in here. But the reason why I prefer to focus on the A7R5 rather than the A7CR, which is smaller and more compact, so it would have made more sense probably, is that the A7CR is not as the advanced camera when it comes to a lot of things. Yes, the guts are the same as the A7R5, but the body is much less usable. You have way less controls, you have a way worse viewfinder, you have a lot less possibilities, you don't have a joystick, there's a lot of stuff that you don't have. And the Z7 was, and it still is, a very good camera from a ergonomic standpoint. The A7CR is not. Now, while we're talking about ergonomics, let's just focus on the differences between these two cameras. From a size and weight perspective, the difference is not that much. They are pretty similar in size. The camera with the A7R5 is a little bit bigger than the Z7, but from a weight perspective, they're pretty much similar. However, even if there's only 50 grams difference in favor of the Nikon, the Sony is actually more balanced. This is because this combination with this lens makes it feel the Z7 a lot more front heavy than the A7R5 does with the Tamron 28 to 200. Probably is also the lens has most of the weight towards the flange rather than towards the front. I don't know, that's how it feels. Even when they extend, they don't extend that much. They extend a lot, but they don't. The difference is basically nothing. However, What you have with the A7R5 is a much, much more advanced control layout. You have plenty of customizable buttons, you have plenty of dials, you have plenty of ways to control your camera. With the Z7, on the other hand, I struggle because I'm used to have at least 3 dials, or with Fuji I also have like only 2 dials, but those 2 are clickable, so you could do a lot of things. With the Z7 you need to use combination of buttons and dials to get to some stuff, and you have a lot less customizable buttons. So from a customizability standpoint, Sony wins big time. On paper, the viewfinder should be an advantage for the Sony, but in reality, the viewfinder is a bit bigger on the Sony and it should be much better in theory, but in reality it's not. Also, I much prefer the position of the Nikon, because the Nikon allows me to squinch a lot less with my right hand, with my right eye, while with Sony it gets more in the way, the camera gets more in the way. This is probably because the EVF on the Nikon is a little bit more on the left, while with the Sony is more centered with the camera. Minor differences, but still differences. Where the Sony has a huge advantage is on the back LCD, not for the quality. The quality is, in my opinion, better on the Nikon than it is on the Sony, but the way you can articulate it is just spectacular. You have all the possible moves that you want. You can get it done with the Sony. With Nikon, you only have up and down, and that's it. So from a flexibility standpoint and from a hand holdability standpoint, big win for the Sony. I also prefer the grip that I have on the Sony. I don't know why. With Nikon, it feels more, it feels weird. It feels weird despite being taller. With the Sony, I know my pinky is going to be out, but I can grip it better. Again, minor differences. I wouldn't choose one or the other because of those differences. Well, yes, for the customizability, yes, the customizability is a huge difference, and it could be a huge difference for many. Hey, before we go back to the video, give me a moment to talk to you about the sponsor of this video. And the sponsor is this carbon fiber tripod from K&F. You probably know them with that name. This is the A254C4 carbon fiber tripod together with the ball head BH-35L. Naming are always complicated with tripod, regardless of the companies, but it is what it is. This is a very good tripod that I've been using in the last few months, ever since I received it. And some of the shots that you've seen or you will see on the video were shot using this tripod, because I wanted to test it before I could even propose it on the channel. I always want to test it. And this is a fairly compact carbon fiber tripod that is only 1.4 kilos in weight, and it also gets to 1.4 meter or 56 inches when you extend the forward section of the legs to their maximum height without extending the center column, and it gets to 1.7 meters, meaning 69 inches, once you extend the center column. Like all the tripods with the center columns, once you extend the center column, it's going to be a little bit more wobbly. So if there's high winds, keep the center column down. And if you're extending the center column, just make sure you use the 5-second or 10-second timer if you can, because that is going to help you. But aside from that, I've found this tripod to be very, very, very sturdy, and especially when the center column is down, I've been using it even in windy condition and it hasn't missed a bit. This gives you the possibility to unscrew one leg and make it become monopod, and it also gives you the possibility to reverse the center column to be able to shoot very low on the ground, because like every tripod with a center column, even if you open the legs to this maximum extent, there's still going to be the center column to get in the way if you want to shoot super low. With this, you just reverse the center column and you can shoot upside down and get very low to the ground. This comes with its own bag, which is a very well done bag, and it's not super tight. Usually when you get the bags, sometimes they're so tight that once you take it out the first time, it's very complicated to put it back in. This is comfortable, it's well done, it's a very well built bag as well. And I can definitely recommend this tripod because I've used it and I will keep using it without any issue. This is a solid solution that doesn't cost you much. This gets sold today at $179. But with the discount code that you see down here, and you also see it in the comments below, if you purchase it from the link below, you can save additional 20% from the current price, which is saving a lot of money. Now back to the video. From a performance standpoint, that's where the real meat of the conversation is. Now, of course, the Sony is a much more recent camera compared to the Nikon, so this is a clear advantage for Sony. You get better autofocus, you get a lot of stuff that you don't have on the Nikon, and you also have much better video capabilities. Like video is a no-show. Sony wins big time. The video on the Z7, apologies for Nikon, it's crap. It's really crap. The autofocus on video is just basically unusable. The tracking is basically unusable. With Sony, you get the best of the best. So if video is your thing, not even think about it. Sony is the way to go. On the other hand, however, between the camera and the lens, there may be substantial differences that may sway your decision one way or the other. Let's start with the more obvious ones. With Sony, you have more megapixels. Of course, you go 61 versus 47. However, once you get past the 40 megapixels, yes, it's an advantage. It gives you more croppability, and if you're going APS-C mode, you still have more megapixel, but you're not gonna see a huge difference when it comes to the image quality, even when you're zooming in a lot. So it's an advantage for Sony. However, you have much bigger files as well, but it's not a huge advantage, at least in my books. For me, once you get past 40, it's okay. It's a high megapixel sensor, and it gets me the quality that I need. The sensor between these two cameras is different, but they both deliver incredible results from a dynamic range perspective, from a high resolution perspective. You get everything that you can ask for from a high megapixel sensor. So don't bother too much with those two. I slightly prefer. Actually, I prefer more the colors that I get out of the Nikon, and I think the Nikon is a little bit behind compared to Sony in the dynamic range department, so they kind of compensate one with the other. But in general, if I look at the end result without editing, the Nikon is a much better final result. However, at high ISO, the situation reverse, and the Sony is gets you a better outcome. Talking about the lenses though, which is probably what makes the most of the differences, you of course have the wider range with the Nikon, because you go from 24 to 200 compared to 28 to 200. Not only that, even when the Nikon is set at 28 millimeters, is still wider than the Tamron at 28. So that means you have more than 4 millimeters on the wide end. You get approximately 6 millimeters, if I have to guess. So that is a big difference. If you're going with a one lens setup, that may be a deciding factor for you. On the other hand, the Tamron is one stop brighter at the wide end, f2.8 versus f4 on the Nikon. That may be another difference, because if you're in lower light, you can shoot better with the Sony setup, especially because it's a little bit better also with high ISO, so you get more flexibility there. With the Nikon, when the lights go down, you kind of need a tripod and you need to change your way of shooting. So that is a different thing. Now, when it comes to the actual performance of the lens, you have the Nikon 24-200 is at its worst at the wide end. So it's wider than the Tamron, but the wide end is the weak spot of the lens. It's not that it's unusable, because it's plenty usable, but it shows corners that never get to the quality of the center. It shows fringing. It shows weaknesses here and there. And this goes up to 30. Once you get to 30, the lens gets a real boost, and it gets spectacularly good at 200 millimeters. With the Tamron, on the other hand, the lens is at its best at 28, although it's not as wide as the Nikon, and it's a little bit worse than the Nikon once you zoom in at 200 millimeters. When it comes to flare, you get similar performance. When it comes to colors between the two setups, I already said I prefer the ones that I get out of Nikon. And one thing that I noticed, and I don't know if that's the camera or the lens, I didn't do specific testing, with the Nikon setup, with the same settings, you get a little bit more light than what you get on the Sony setup. If I had to guess, I believe this is the lens that yes, it's f2.8, but the light transmittance is not as good as it is on the Nikon. It's not a huge deal, but it's something that is worth being mentioned. One important thing is the difference that you get when it comes to close focal capabilities, because when you're around, you may want to go close to something and get close up. Well, with the Tamron, you can get a lot closer at the wide end than you can with Nikon, but there's no comparison there, and the lens is pretty sharp, even at the minimum focusing distance. Once you zoom in and you get to 200 millimeters, the minimum focusing distance is pretty similar. However, as already mentioned before, at 200 millimeters, the Nikon is sharper than the Tamron. Now, it's up to you what it is that you believe it's best for you. I tend to think that being able to shoot macro at the wide end is a pretty important benefit, because sometimes you don't want to obliterate the background, you just want to get close and get a wide perspective. So that is definitely an important thing, but that's very, very personal. I already mentioned that when it comes to performance, the autofocus on the Sony smokes the autofocus on the Nikon, but that is mostly for video and for continuous autofocus in general. When it comes to single autofocus, yes, the Sony is better. I have missed a few shots here and there with the Nikon, but it's not that dramatically different. And for the purpose of one camera, one lens setup, you're probably going for landscape, travel stuff. Autofocus is not going to play a huge role as the decisive factor, because they're going to be both pretty good to do whatever you think about doing with a setup like this. And so in conclusion, each setup has its own advantages. With the Nikon, you get a much cheaper setup. I paid basically 1,600 euros for both. The Z7 was 1,000 euros, and $600 used was the lens. That is less than half the price of the camera along with Sony, which is, I paid for 3,500 euros for these cameras. And even if you want to get it used, you don't find that many around. And the few ones that you find, they're still going to cost you around 3,000 euros anyways, or dollars, something around that. So you get a huge saving with going with the Nikon setup. You get a better LCD screen, which is crazy. Sony should be the best at doing that, since they make 70, 85, 90 inches TVs. They should be pretty good at that, but for their cameras, they just don't. You get a wider range, which is much wider than the millimeters on the barrel say on the Nikon, and basically you get better colors, you get a more usable file right out of the gate. On the Sony, on the other hand, you get a much more customizable camera, which it takes more to customize at the beginning, but once you do it, it's much more customizable and it gets you much more controls. Better ergonomics, at least for me, aside from the viewfinder position. You get faster autofocus, better video performance. Of course, you're getting a lot more with the Sony because it's also a much more modern camera, so it should be expected. From an image quality standpoint, they're comparable. Some wins on one end, some wins on the other hand, but they're pretty good. You shouldn't be concerned about anything. And of course, if you're already in one of these two systems, there's no reason to switch to get the best setup. They're both great. You shouldn't be worried about that. And if I had to start from scratch, I would probably start with the Nikon if that was my main concern, if this type of using scenario was my main concern. However, for my specific use, I will sell the 24-200. I have no intention on selling the G7 because I'm going to keep using the Sony setup. And that is for some specific reasons that I'm gonna get you right now. First, I'm heavily invested in Sony. Okay, I have two bodies, as I mentioned. I have the A7R5 and the A7CR, and my main photographic and video setup is now on Sony. So, in order for me to have a travel setup with Nikon, I would end up spending at least for another camera and for another lens, which is the next point. Why is that? Because usually when I travel, if I go in places that I know I'm not going to be visiting that frequently or may not be visiting anymore, I want to have two cameras. I don't want to have just one, because if that one fails, I have basically lost the possibility of photographing the way I want the places that I'm going to visit. So I would need to invest in another camera, and that is not financially savvy, if you want. The second reason is that even if I discuss this one lens setup type of comparison, I will never go with one lens. I always bring with me an ultra wide lens. That's because I shoot a lot of ultra wide landscapes. And so even if I went with this, I would always pair with another lens which is wider. Now, I happen to have the 16-25 review over here that I love, the Sony 16-25 f2.8. That is a lens that I use a lot for event, for landscape, for everything that I can think of. It's a very, very flexible lens. It's a very good lens. It's a lens that surprised me. And so if I had to invest in Nikon, I would have to purchase another lens. And that lens would necessarily be the 14-30, a lens that I love. The review over here, it's a lens that it's just spectacular. However, the lens is f4, so that means that it is going to get me a little less flexibility from that standpoint, but it's a much wider range that has its own advantages. Last but not least, the camera makes a lot of difference for me. The way I feel the camera makes a lot of difference for me. I already mentioned I feel the A7 R5 better than I do with the Z7, mostly because of the customizable function, customizable buttons, customizable dials, all of the things that I mentioned. That for me is a huge difference, because I want to be able to have my specific function assigned to specific buttons. I don't want to dive in the menu that much. I hate doing that. So for me, the camera plays a huge role in the decision factor. On top of that, I shoot videos here and there. It's not my main thing, but I do shoot videos, and there's no comparison in videos. I mentioned the Z7 basically sucks. Apologies for Nikon users, but that's the reality. And again, I'm not planning on selling the Z7, so it's not that I despise the camera. I don't. But when it comes to video, it's not usable in a modern way. And so for me, the camera plays a huge role. Now, that's the moment where I start begging Nikon to make a Z7 Mark III. Because I understand there's a Z8 around. But that camera, as I mentioned, is bulky, is heavy, has its own advantages, a stacked camera. There's a lot of advantages. And I believe that if I tried that camera, I would love it. And I would love it for work. However, I would definitely not love it for travel and lightweight motion around, like hiking, stuff like that. I would hate that camera because of the size and weight. So there's still room in the market for a high megapixel, non-stacked sensor, compact camera in the Nikon lineup. And that's where the Z7 III should go. A Z7 III, the way I hope it gets made, is gonna change a lot in the landscape of this type of usage, because it will be I know for a fact it's going to be, it would be, no, it's going to be, because I don't know if it's coming, but I know for a fact it would be a great, great, great camera. I hope you like this video. Let me know in the comments below if you want to know more about my decisions, if you want to know more about these cameras, if there's something that I forgot to mention or I didn't go deep enough into explaining. If you've got to this point, I beg you, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. It's very important for me. It helps the algorithm, and therefore it helps me. That's it for today. Ciao, and I'll see you in the next one.